Welcome all. I'm Rania Francoeur, and today's session is specifically geared towards those CTO, CIO roles and those that work with them. What are the strategic challenges and opportunities facing those roles, what they should be considering, and what their supports should be considering, including the CEO, CPO, etc. So the usual format for these hours is that Randall Craig, the CEO of the Brain Trust Professional Institute, we welcome him to share a few ideas. Then we flip into questions. I brainstormed a lot of questions to ask him. He is in the hot seat. Randall has no idea what I'm going to ask, and let's see what he comes up with. So, for those who don't yet know Randall, he has founded several successful startups. He held a long-time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive in an American public company. He's the author of 8 books in the Speaker Hall of Fame, master facilitator. He has helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow their businesses with executive coaching, leadership retreats, and facilitating conversations to align teams. Okay, Randall, where do you want to begin?
You know, where I'd like to begin is actually to take a step back to corporate strategy. And the reason why is because if we think about corporate strategy, it's always, it's approved at the board, the leadership team, they come up with the HR strategy, they come up with the operations strategy and the finance strategy, and yes, the IT strategy. And then you take that IT strategy and you sort of divide it up. Here's a data management strategy, and here's the governance strategy, and here's the user computer, the end user support. Here's the infrastructure strategy, the dev and app support, and cybersecurity and risk. So you come up with all the strategies, and then you've got your managers to actually do this. And what I wanted to do is I really wanted in this session to sort of flip it around and say that is not the way the real world works. And in most organizations, and certainly our view of the future, and it speaks to the role really of the CIO, CTO, and really what I say it's flipped. I'm really talking about like three things. Number one is cyber security, IP protection, AI. These are now board issues. They're no longer things that are, quote, relegated to the folks in charge of IT. Number two, IT is now a key input into the strategy. It's not just a tactical execution tool, which means that the kinds of things that you can bring to the table actually make a difference to what that strategy actually is. It's not just the arms and legs to actually execute. Number three is IT leadership is no longer nuts and bolts IT. I don't think this should be a surprise to most people on this particular call, but it's really business leadership through IT. It's it's the business knowledge, the alignment with the business needs, etc. And there's a significant difference between that kind of role versus the person who's kind of taking care of the IT, right? Because we've seen this in other parts of the organizations. The chief people officer, chief HR officer is not usually nowadays in many organizations to somebody who gets promoted within. Often at times it's a leader who may not have actually the technical skills in that area. Same thing. I've recently met a number of CFOs that are not actually people that come up through that traditional path, but they are business leaders who've got that functional responsibility because they're business leaders first, and they're responsible for executing a functional role at the highest level. And I think this is kind of an interesting thing, because if you buy into that process, that the CTO, CIO is not the person in charge of the tools, if you will, but also are truly the business leader who's got input that is relevant at the board level as well as at the senior leadership level. Then the question becomes, okay, you're in your particular role right now, or maybe you're looking to move into that role. What do you do to actually close that gap? And I think that's a fascinating question, particularly if you spent your entire career in there. By the way, there's many ways to close the gap. We can certainly get into it. But I think this speaks to maybe repositioning in your mind with respect to, okay, so this is what got me to where I am today. Are those same things what's going to power me to my next level? And more importantly, if indeed the world of business has changed so dramatically and you buy into sort of that view that I just shared, your role actually demands an awful lot more. And the best ones are doing it. The best ones absolutely are doing it. My question is, are you doing as much as you can to make that significant difference, to recognize that the functional area that you're responsible for and your particular business acumen, the lens that you look at the world, okay, has actually got strategic importance, not just for the organization as a whole, but also for all the different individual areas within it. That's my context. And that's what that's what we hope to cover today.
Shall I lob some questions at you?
Well, let's lob some questions. I'd love to hear.
Okay, Randall. If we talk to any C-suite leader, any of the big decision makers and CTOs or CIOs in particular, and you ask them, what are your biggest challenges? The typical answers that you get back are things like, oh, all the uncertainty or competing priorities. And this is, of course, true at 30,000 feet, but is this like perhaps like a whitewashed answer to not really show what's happening, behind stage left, stage right? Like, is this just like the public facing PR primed answer so that CTOs and CIOs don't have to reveal like anything to the public?
No, I think it's a bona fide answer, you know. I'm sure in some cases it is that whitewash, okay, but for the most part, I think it's a bona fide answer because uncertainty can come from a lot of different places. You know, the marketing folks, all of a sudden, the numbers aren't sort of where they need to be. There's some surprise PR thing. From the operational perspective, it's something completely different. Um, a new competitor, some new, if we look certainly at where we are now, who would have thought the AI or any of the other new technologies would suddenly come up? This throws a strategy completely into disarray. I think also, if we think about the impact of some of the political environment, really, that's also something that is quite uncertain, right? And then, there's a lot of moving parts within the organization. So if you're making decisions that are actually ones that are for longer periods of time, the longer term decisions or big investment decisions or directional ones, some of the uncertainty, you've got to plan for it, or you've got to at least, maybe do some scenario work, or maybe just have some of those deeper conversations with your colleague with respect to how do we mitigate these particular risks or not. It's a good question.
Every strategic business leader has to be, customer focused, product focused, really what does that customer want? But if you look at the priorities and responsibilities and challenges that the CIOs and CTOs are facing their priorities, like client focus isn't really there. Is this something that we're going to see change or is this appropriate? And when they still need to be looking at, lean cost, cybersecurity, managing talent, like what do you think?
So I think one of the more interesting things in terms of trends nowadays is just the where the decision making actually takes place with respect to marketing technology. So, for example, is a particular decision about using a technology. Maybe it's the agency has recommended a particular thing. Maybe it's in the budget of marketing, where in the past it might have been in the budget of the IT shop, for example. Maybe it's being outsourced on a platform as opposed to actually done in-house. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and I think that is something that is a lot newer and is not going to change. Everything's in the cloud. What's not in the cloud, though, is the importance of managing risk and the importance of managing change and the importance of making sure that whatever decisions any particular department, whether it's HR with respect to HRIS and outsource HRIS services, or operational work, or even supply chain, or certainly finance and some of the platforms that are available there, to make sure that the whole question of IP protection, cyber security, making sure that there's alignment so that there isn't, say, vendor or platform lock-in. All these are issues that are very complex when the decisions for some of those technology purchases or commitments are being made outside the group, which speaks once again to the importance of the collaboration and between these particular groups, particularly when some organizations may not see IT as the true partner when it really should be, and that's usually the intent.
Mm. Without giving examples, we can all think of companies that rolled out tech platforms and apps that offered a negative customer experience, and it negatively in fact impacted the brand. And when this happens and finger pointing becomes the sport of the day, I think of like the chicken and the egg situation. Like, did the CTO fail, or was there a lack of brand clarity that they went down this row, this direction?
In the past, we've been hired half the time from the CMO, from the business side, if you will. And we were, part of the brief was we need to help these IT folks understand kind of what this whole, user experience, customer experience, client experience, marketing, branding, et cetera, is all about so that they would understand. And the other part of the time, we're hired by the IT folks. The CTO, the CIO says, you know something, these marketing, the business side doesn't really understand kind of the constraints, the importance of the stuff we're doing right over here. It is absolutely a shared responsibility, right? And I think that too often what ends up happening, excuse me, what ends up happening is there isn't that communication. So, for example, the marketing people go off and they decide to actually do something of their own. And when they do something of their own, they're not sort of knocking on the door of the IT. They're not using that in-house expertise to make sure their decision is better for whatever reason, right? On the other hand, the folks on the IT side of the house, well, they'll make a whole big decision. The AI acceptable use policy, right? The certain types of customer support platform decisions, etc. And they'll never realize, because there hasn't been that deep conversation about the impact on brand with some of their decisions actually in that area. It's very much one team here, right? Where both sides, the business side and the IT side, and I think most CTOs, CIOs I've ever spoken to truly, truly understand this. But my challenge is, do the processes beyond your understanding match up with that? Is there, for example, somebody from the marketing group whose eyes, for example, are on some of your cybersecurity policies or data protection policies, right? And the answer to that is, well, no, this is a technology issue. This is that's not, no, in a certain sense, it's a brand angle to it. And sometimes just asking means that you're demonstrating an openness, okay, which hopefully will be reciprocated. And at the same time, from the marketing perspective, or anybody who's considering a platform decision in order, in their particular area of responsibility, why not take advantage of this huge amount of experience that's actually within your organization, right? And the question of getting back and forth so that you're building the trust, so that you realize that both are necessary to execute a particular strategy and deliver on that strategy, means that it's you won't have the problem. You won't have the problem in the future.
Randall, I've heard you and others say that the role of CEO is the loneliest job in the world. I don't think it has to be, but interestingly, I think this adage is applicable to this like CIO, CTO role. In terms of the expectations that we have for leaders, I think like the baseline expectation is like superhuman. For CTOs, we expect them to know everything, make every right decision, and expect them to know the future. Mistakes are not rewarded. Between like NDAs and the risk of embarrassing the organization or revealing their own secrets, like who do you recommend that they talk to? Like, what is the support system?
I think that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Okay, because I'm thinking of a couple of the CIO, CTOs that I know. These are the most authentic, personable folks you could possibly have around. I would have I'd go out for a beer or go for a cycle with any of them, just because they're fascinating individuals and they're sharp and they're real and they don't have this big, I don't know um, feeling of, gee, I must be perfect all the time. And I think that those are the great models to follow. I think the question of how do you set expectations with the CEO with respect to what you're able to do and what your team's able to do is an important part of any leader's responsibility. And so hopefully some of the issues that you're talking about can be mitigated. Now, listen, everybody sort of backs into a certain dynamic, et cetera. And sometimes a dynamic is one where everything is just, it's just, the expectations are just so high, right? But this is why you make sure that you have a good team. This is why you make sure that you're investing in the team. This is where, for example, if you're doing a corporate retreat, maybe you could take some of that time to sort of open the kimono and share with your peers some of the challenges that are actually taking place. There's a whole bunch of other ways that you could build credibility through your functional leadership and sort of address this huge high risk issue. And I don't know if everyone really knows that all of these different buttons and levers actually exist because they do. They do. And by the way, it's not just at your level as the CTO, CIO, it's also for the people just below you and the people, if it's a larger shop, the people below that. There's a lot of pressure to perform, right? There's a lot of standards of performance, right? And getting it wrong has big impacts internally and externally as well.
Something you speak to clients about often that is often not on their radar is the idea of cross-departmental metrics, where the KPIs and measures of success are a reflection of effective collaboration between multiple departments and teams. Do you want to speak to like what the CTO CI should look like when it comes to cross-departmental metrics?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thanks for bringing it up. Um, it's too easy to think about the silos and saying to each leader of each of the silo, what are those metrics that sort of fold into the corporate, and if you're a not-for-profit, you use a balanced scorecard, but still things fold up to it, etc. Okay, but where is the impact where several people actually have their fingers in the pie. Maybe it's in client support, okay, or customer support, right? Where there's some technology and there's some people. It affects the brand or the reputation. It also reflects some of the technology and the efficiency, etc. I think every organization is a little bit different in terms of what the specific metrics are, but I think that there's nothing that builds cooperation than holding leaders to the same metrics. And yes, of course, at the C-suite, everybody should have the clear metrics, etc. If we go down one level and look for the bilateral metrics that could make a difference, and just working through what they might be, right? And sometimes, by the way, it's not just the metrics, but it's those conversations that have really powerful value, right? Because they force understanding, right? And they force collaboration.
In the tech world, in the startup world, we see lots of founders as the CEO, understandably, of their own companies, but they're not just the CEO, they're also their own CTO, right? And if we look at the career of Randall Craig, where you founded, you were CEO of two companies with a strong tech angle, you were also really your own CTO, no? Like,
No, 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 I
like
was
that way?
not. I knew enough. Listen, I knew enough to be dangerous, really, really dangerous, right? In the sense that I could ask people questions, and the people who knew a lot more than me, sort of got a sense of what I was after and sort of how to meet that particular goal. But for me, I've got one of my challenges. I love technology. I love to fiddle, right? Which means I'm the ultimate tech support for my elderly relatives and other colleagues at the Brain Trust and all that kind of stuff. But no, no, no. It really is a question of saying, listen, as a leader, what are the questions you can ask that can begin those conversations or to have the people that you work with explore a little bit more in a particular area? Because if you're always the expert yourself, now in startup scale-ups, that's another issue. Okay, if for example a startup is a business-like person and a tech kind of person, they come together, they come up with the concept, they're growing, 8, 10 people, 25, 35 people. Are those two people in those two roles, which are very generalist roles, you start splitting the role into bits and pieces. Okay, now we're gonna have a CFO our accounting manager. Then we're going to have a CFO, and gee, we're going to have this. I'm not just the tech guy and the programmer and builder, etc. I'm going to actually call myself a CTO. And gee, I need a dev, and I need this. And then all of a sudden, before long, you're in a much bigger organization, and you actually don't have the skills to function at that level of complexity. And so it's a real challenge, certainly, if there's a board of directors involved or a majority shareholder, gee, are the people that got us here the ones that will get us there? Well, does that CIO, CTO Yes, they're brilliant. Yes, they built the platform. Yes, they know where every single little bit is sort of buried and how to use it for more efficiency. But do they have the skills to move the organization to the next? Sometimes the answer is yes. Okay, in which case all is good. Okay, although at a higher level of risk because you because you really don't know. And sometimes the answer is yes, but. Pardon me. Sometimes the answer is yes, but they need some help, right? In which case, the question is, how can you actually support them, whether it's through coaching or whether it's some specific professional development or by putting in a great number two, sort of right behind them, et cetera, and thinking about succession, or maybe there's some other alternatives as well. There are. And so you want to make, rather than just saying, by the way, gee, person CTO who got us to here, now you're no longer here. There's a lot of other potential things you can do, right? It's all a question about what is the career path, right? And for the startup or the scale up CIO, CTO. So I think that that's an interesting one. I think another interesting question is for an established organization, whether it's kind of in scale mode or whether it's hit a certain stride, et cetera. What's the career path for the CIO, CTO? On one hand, it's very easy. Well, you can actually quit and you can go to another organization that's twice as big. You can, or much bigger. Yes, you can go to another division if it's a large organization to give you a new challenge. Maybe there's a new sector, maybe it's a new geography, and sort of that internal kind of thing. Another career path is to say, well, maybe there's some other operational responsibilities or staff responsibilities I could take responsibility for. We see many CIO, CTO types who also may have responsibility for other administrative things, right? Maybe some operations, maybe some, you know, excuse me, something else, right? Or maybe what you can do is you can say, well, you know what? Maybe my next role is COO. I know some CIOs who actually move to that role. Sometimes they're able to do it within the organization if they've been able to establish themselves truly as a business leader, not just as a technology leader. And sometimes I've seen them actually leave the organization, sometimes to work for a slightly smaller one because they understand, what it needs to be successful at that scale, but slightly smaller, and move into that COO role and had great success. But they didn't have great success and they wouldn't have been hired into that role unless they first were actually doing some of those things as part of their job today, right? And so I think that's an important kind of angle that most CIOs, CTOs need to consider. Also, let me just talk very briefly. We've been using the word CIO and CTO almost interchangeably, right? And at some point, maybe they were called data processing managers. Times change, etc. But there's a little bit difference between the two roles. I want to acknowledge that the pure role of a CIO is very different than a pure role of a CTO. And they are distinctive jobs, and many organizations are the same. In some organizations, the actual title of the person has changed as the definition and understanding has changed as well. But I just wanted to call out that as an aspect.
Of course, thank you. Randall, if we're talking about resources for CTOs and CIOs, distinct jobs, but both needing resources, my next question is for Randall as coach. You provide coaching largely for CEOs or the most senior person in the company, but really for anyone in that C-suite. Obviously, the CIO, CTOs have to really understand their space really well. But I'm curious to hear, like, what is your approach for coaching those seats? Like, what would your goals be? And what would success look like?
So I think it's a very simple one. How do you manage the transition from you as a technical functional leader to one who is now capable and comfortable leading at a higher level, whether it's COO or CEO, or whether it's just to widen the role of CIO, CTO that you currently have to include more operational responsibilities, administrative leadership responsibilities. Because you may have spent an entire career, this would be my message to them, truly becoming an expert in your particular area. But other than perhaps watching by osmosis, you haven't had as much experience thinking about how might I roll into one of these other roles. Okay. And even if that's not your objective, it's how do I, with an understanding of the strategic nature of IT today, certainly the board level and certainly at the senior leadership level, how and its impact on strategy, how do I make sure that I'm actually becoming a lot more proactive about doing that in a way that actually moves the enterprise forward, right? And also gives me some great career enrichment at the same time. So that would be, every leader, every C-suite leader I've ever worked with, they've got all kinds of things that are challenges that I can provide perspective on. But the bigger picture really is how do we sort of grow you as a leader in a way that makes you more efficient now and positions you for more, if you're interested, for that wider role sometime in the future. Or sometimes it's just a question of, hey, how do I get that mojo back? Right? How do I get that mojo back? So that's what I would say.
Mm. Okay, sounds exciting. Okay.
It
So
is exciting.
here's the scenario. Here's the scenario. I'm getting a coach, okay? So right now to be a top tier high performing CTO, CIO, you have to be, strategy, technology, people management, the operations. It's very hard to find any employee who's like super top in all the areas. You can find someone who's really good at one or two, but not all of them. So the CEO comes in and says, "Okay, CTO, CIO, I'm going to get you a coach, a business coach that's going to help you help grow the business, grow your department." What is this? Is this like a writings on the wall that you're like underperforming? Is this on that topic? We're going to break here. This part one of two on business leadership and strategic challenges for CTOs and CIOs. We'll pick up with more Q&As in part two. If anything we talked about so far resonates with you, if you're looking for change, better align your team, coaching, leadership retreat facilitation, do reach out. We'd be happy to learn about your organization and share resources. You can contact us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30. And we'll see you back for part two and we'll see you on LinkedIn.